Mira sat on the cold floor of her cell, staring at the metal wall in front of her. The lights above flickered softly, casting shadows on the strange symbols carved into the walls. She was inside an alien ship, huge, quiet, and filled with creatures. That didn't speak much, the Zeruan, that was their name. Tall, gray-skinned, with eyes like black stones. They moved like ghosts and spoke in sharp, cold voices. Mira had never seen anything like them before. And now she was their prisoner. She was the last one from her team. The rest were gone, either taken away or killed when the Zeruan ambushed their science ship near a dying star. Mira didn't even know how many days had passed since then. Time felt slow inside this ship. She had been captured during a peaceful mission. Her crew had been studying star patterns and old signals. They never expected to meet a species like this. At first, the Zeruan didn't even respond to greetings. Then they attacked. Now Mira sat alone. The door to her cell was sealed shut. No food, no bed, no sound. Just silence and the slow hum of the alien ship moving through space. Then the door slid open. A Zeruan commander entered. His name was Veltor, though it sounded more like a machine code than a name. His voice echoed without emotion. "Your planet is under review," he said. Mira stood up slowly, her eyes steady. "Review for what?" "Judgment," Veltor replied. "We observe, we decide. Unfit planets are erased." Mira's heart beat faster, but she kept her face calm. "Erased? You mean destroyed?" "Correct. Why?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. "You are unstable, emotional, violent, wasteful. Your species grows like fire." Mira clenched her fists. "We are also kind, brave. We learn. We help each other." Veltor tilted his head, almost curious. "We will see." He left without another word. Mira sat back down, feeling the fear rise in her chest. Earth didn't even know what was coming. The Zeruan had the power to erase entire worlds, no warning, no mercy. And now Earth was next, but Mira wasn't ready to give up. She looked around the cell. Hidden under her boot was a small device, a weak signal transmitter. She had fixed it using broken pieces from her suit and parts she had found during a scan. She tapped the device quickly, fingers moving with care. She sent one last signal. A message across deep space. "This is Mira from Earth, captured by Zeruan. Earth in danger. Please help. Anyone." She didn't know if it would reach anyone. The ship had strong signal jammers. The message was weak, like throwing a pebble into a storm. But still, she sent it. Then she waited. Far across the solar system, on a quiet station above Saturn's rings, a man named Dan worked alone. He was a mechanic, fixing small ships and checking fuel lines. Most people didn't talk to him much. He liked it that way. But today, something strange happened. A tiny red light blinked on his old radio screen, a private signal. Ancient frequency. Almost lost, Dan leaned closer and played the message. It was her voice. He froze. Mira? He hadn't heard that voice in years. They had trained together once, long ago. She had gone into science. He had gone into war. Then he had disappeared from the world. Now her voice was calling him from across the stars. Captured. Earth. In danger. Dan stood up slowly. His hands tightened into fists. The quiet man who fixed engines was gone. He moved quickly, opening an old locker in the back of the station. Inside was a worn-out flight suit, a sealed black box, and a ship key marked Arrow 9, a stealth ship, long hidden. No one would believe him. No one would stop the Zeruan, but he didn't care. He whispered to himself, "She's still out there, and they don't know what humans can do." Dan climbed into the ship. Engines roared to life. The Arrow 9 vanished into the dark, heading toward the stars. Dan sat in the cockpit of the Arrow 9, watching the stars pass by in streaks of white. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp and focused. The ship's AI, a soft voice named Isla, broke the silence. "Course locked." Arrival near Zeruan Fleet. In 22 hours, Dan nodded. Keep us hidden. Use deep cloak mode. Cloak active. No known systems can detect us, Isla replied. Dan checked his old combat gear. It was worn, but still worked. The tools were simple, no powerful weapons. No large cannons. Just small tools, smoke bombs, an old blaster, and a sharp mind. He was not here to fight a war. He was here for one thing: Myra, on the alien ship Kural 6. Mira was taken from her cell. 2 silent Zeruan guards walked beside her, their feet making no sound on the smooth black floor. She was brought into a large, dim room with walls that looked like glass and stars floating beyond them. This was the trial room. The Zeruan Council stood like statues in a half circle. Each one wore a glowing band around their neck. These were memory drainer's tools that could read the past of anyone standing before them. Veltor stepped forward. You are Myra of Earth. You will now show us your planet. I won't help you destroy it, she said firmly. You have no choice, he replied. Suddenly, a beam of light surrounded her. The memory drainer began its work. Images flashed her. Childhood, her team, the blue sky of Earth, music, dancing, people laughing, rivers flowing, cities rising. The Zeruan watched in silence. One of them, named Salvek, twitched slightly. Something about a memory, Myra holding a kitten as a child, seemed to disturb him. These emotions, Salvek said, almost confused. What is their purpose? They make us human, Myra whispered. Tor tilted his head. Weak. Unstable. Myra looked around the room. No, they make us strong. We care. That's why we survive. The council remained quiet. Time was running out. Earth's judgment was only 4 days away. Meanwhile, Dan had arrived near the Zeruan fleet. He stopped his ship far outside their sensor range, hidden behind a frozen asteroid field. From there, he could see the massive black ships floating near a dying star. They looked like giants, silent, dangerous, impossible to defeat. But Dan smiled. He opened a secret panel beside his chair. Inside was an old device, a Zeruan drone hacker he had built years ago during a forgotten battle. He activated it, and a nearby patrol drone blinked and turned toward his command. Isla, Dan said, send the drone to the ship. Cause trouble. Draw their eyes away from the docking bay. Confirmed, said Isla. The drone zipped forward and slammed into the side of the Kural 6, creating a small explosion. Alarms rang. Lights turned red. All Zeruan eyes turned toward the damage. Dan used the moment to move. His stealth ship flew low, quiet as a whisper, and attached to the underside of the enemy vessel. He stepped into his suit and opened the small hatch. Cold space rushed past him, then silence. He climbed into the alien ship through a maintenance tunnel. Inside the ship, Mira felt the ship shake. The council stopped the memory stream. Veltor spoke sharply. An attack, possibly a system failure. Guards, returned the prisoner to her cell. Mira tried to look calm, but hope rose in her chest. That explosion, it wasn't a normal failure. Something was happening. Maybe someone was coming. She didn't know who. But her message, maybe it had worked. Dan moved fast inside the narrow halls. He stayed low, dodging drones and cameras. The map of the ship slowly built inside his visor. He was close now. Very close, he whispered. Hold on, Mira, I'm coming. He stopped at a corner and saw 2 Zeruan guards near a control panel. He threw a small flash disk, blinding them, and knocked them out with 2 quick moves. Quiet, clean. Then he hacked the door controls. Myra's cell was just ahead. Dan moved forward, heart pounding, eyes sharp. Dan stepped quietly through the long hallway. The walls of the Zeruan ship were dark and smooth like stone. Strange lights moved across the ceiling like waves. The air felt cold, heavy, and full of silence. He checked the map on his wrist screen. Mira's cell was just ahead. 2 doors, 1 guard post. Dan stopped. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small cube. It was a sound trap, a device that could create fake footsteps. He tossed it behind a corner and tapped it. A moment later, footsteps echoed down the opposite hall. 2 Zeruan guards turned fast and moved toward the sound. As they left their post, Dan sprinted silently to the door. He placed his palm scanner on the lock and waited. Click. The door slid open. Inside, Mira was sitting with her back to the wall, head down. She looked up quickly, expecting another alien face, but instead she saw him. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Dan? Dan smiled, but only for a second. Let's go. Mira stood up quickly, still weak but filled with sudden energy. How are you here? No time. We have to move, Dan said, handing her a small stun stick. You remember how to use this? She gripped it tightly. Yes. They slipped into the hallway together, moving quickly. Mira stayed close to Dan, who led the way with sharp focus. But suddenly, a loud alarm echoed through the ship. Red lights flashed across the walls. They found the drone, Dan said. We need a new exit. In the control chamber, Veltor watched the security feeds. A shadow moved through the camera views, fast, quiet, human. Impossible, he hissed. How did one of them get inside? Salvek looked disturbed. They are more clever than we believed. Veltor stared at the screen showing Mira and Dan moving through the ship. This proves it. Their species must be erased, he said coldly. Send all drones, find them. Dan and Mira ran through the lower level of the ship, passing rooms filled with strange alien machines and glowing tubes. Mira looked around with a mix of fear and wonder. This place is huge, she said, breathing hard. Dan nodded. It's a war ship, but it's also something else. They collect things, memories, species. They stopped in front of a large door. Dan quickly hacked the lock. Inside, Mira gasped. There were rows and rows of floating orbs, each one holding images, people, animals, cities, memories. Some were from Earth, others were from worlds she didn't even recognize. This is a memory vault, she whispered. They drain minds, Dan said. Keep pieces of each world they destroy. Mira's hands tightened. They're not just judges, they're thieves. Dan pulled her back. We'll tell the world later. Right now we survive. Suddenly, metal clanks echoed from the hallway. Drones. Dan threw a smoke bomb and pulled Mira into a side tunnel. Shots fired behind them, but the smoke blocked the drone's aim. They crawled through a narrow shaft, barely able to move. Mira's heart pounded in her chest. Why did you come? She asked softly. Dan kept crawling. Because no one else would. You could have died. I still might, he said. But I couldn't leave you, and I couldn't let them destroy Earth. At the edge of the ship, Dan found an emergency shuttle bay. Only 2 small escape shuttles were docked. He started working fast, hacking the panel. Mira watched the hallway behind them. They're coming. I just need 1 minute, Dan said. You always say that, she replied with a weak smile. Still true, he said. The shuttle door opened. Mira stepped inside. Dan followed and closed the hatch. Suddenly, the ship shook violently. The AI voice inside the Zeruan vessel said in a cold tone, Human shuttle detected. Lockdown activated. Steel doors began closing around the bay. Dan shouted, Hold tight. He launched the shuttle. It scraped past the closing gates and shot into open space. They were out. Mira slumped into the seat. We're alive. Dan checked the controls, but not safe. The Zeruan fleet will chase us. We're small and unarmed. Mira looked at the dying star behind them. Then what's the plan? Dan stared at the stars. Something big. Something they won't expect. The small shuttle flew through space, silent and fast. Inside, Mira looked out the window, her eyes wide with fear. Behind them, the giant Zeruan ship was growing smaller, but not gone. "They'll follow us," she said softly. Dan nodded. "They always do, but I have a plan." The shuttle was old and had no real weapons, but Dan was calm. He moved like someone who had been in worse situations and survived. Myra asked, "Why didn't Earth send help?" Dan didn't answer right away. Then he said, "They didn't believe the message." "But I did." She looked at him. "You believed in me?" Dan gave a small smile. "I never stopped." On the Zeruan command ship, Veltor watched the shuttle escape on the screen. His voice was colder than before. "Two humans escaping my ship. This cannot be allowed." He turned to Salvek. "Prepare the war fleet. Track them. Burn their trail." Salvek looked at the screen again. "Sir, why do they keep resisting?" "Because they're weak," Veltor said, "and weakness tries to escape fate." But deep in his mind, Salvek wasn't so sure anymore. Dan flew the shuttle into a hidden area behind a broken moon. It was quiet here, dark and full of space junk. Dan opened a hidden panel and pulled out a small metal box. Mira tilted her head. "What is that?" Dan opened it slowly. Inside was a glowing chip. "This," he said, "is Earth's last gift. A prototype device called the Fold Spark. What does it do?" "It can bend space for a few seconds. Just enough to hide something. Or someone." Mira was silent, then asked, "Why didn't you use it before?" Dan stared at the chip. "Because once it's used, it breaks space around it. No one can follow, but no one can return either." Mira's eyes widened. "So, if we use it, we might disappear forever." Back on the Zeruan ship, the tracking AI locked onto the human shuttle. The fleet prepared for chase. Dozens of war drones moved into position. Veltor gave the order, "Capture or destroy." Inside the shuttle, Mira checked the fuel levels. "We don't have much power left, maybe enough for one big move." Dan nodded. "Then we make it count." He flew the shuttle directly into an asteroid field nearby. The Zeruan drones followed fast, firing from behind. Rocks shattered around them. One blast hit the back of the shuttle. "We're hit." Mira shouted. "Hold on," Dan said. He pulled the shuttle up and looped between the rocks. Then he did something strange. He shut down the engines completely. The shuttle went dark. "Are you crazy?" Mira asked. Dan whispered, "Just wait." The drones passed by, scanning. But with no heat or sound, they missed the shuttle. One by one, the drones flew past, searching the wrong direction. Dan waited 10 more seconds. Then he turned the ship back on. "They're gone," he said. Myra stared at him. "You're full of surprises." Dan laughed quietly. "Only the useful kind." Later, they reached a quiet area of space, far from stars and ships. Dan looked at the Fold Spark chip again. "This is it," he said. "We use this to hide Earth. If the Zeruan can't see it or remember it, they can't attack it. But where will we go?" Mira asked. Dan looked at her. "Does it matter? If Earth is safe, that's enough for me." She didn't speak for a moment, then said softly, "You're risking everything." Dan looked at her gently. "So did you when you sent that message." As they prepared the Fold Spark, the Zeruan fleet appeared again on the radar. Mira gasped. "They're here, too fast." Dan took a deep breath and activated the core. The device hummed, then glowed bright. A blue light filled the shuttle. The stars around them began to stretch and bend. Time slowed. Space cracked like glass. The Zeruan ships fired, but the blasts missed. Everything vanished in a blink. Earth was gone from their view. Veltor stared at the screen in shock. Where did they go?" Salvek stepped forward. "They bent space. They hid their world." Veltor's hands tightened. "Impossible," Salvek whispered. "Or maybe human." Blue light faded slowly from around the small shuttle. Mira opened her eyes first. Everything outside the window was quiet. No stars moved. No ships followed. Dan sat still in the pilot seat, breathing hard. Did it work? Mira asked. Dan looked. At the screen, it was blank, no signals, no maps. Only silence. I think it did, he said. We're outside normal space now. Mira stood and walked to the back window. All she saw was blackness and strange shapes moving far in the distance, like broken glass floating through the dark. What is this place? She whispered. Dan replied. Fold space. A space between spaces. We're safe here. For now. Back in normal space, the Zeruan fleet searched in confusion. Veltor shouted commands, scan every direction. Use deep spectrum, find the human world. But nothing appeared. Salvek stood at the edge of the control room, silent. He stared at the screen, thinking about the memories he saw in Mira's trial smiles. Music, rivers. Something was changing inside him. He felt uncertain. And in the Zeruan Empire, that was dangerous, inside the small shuttle. Mira helped Dan fix the control panel. Can we go back to Earth now? She asked. Dan shook his head. Earth is hidden behind a fold wall now. Even we can't go back unless we know the exact key. Do you have the key? Dan looked down. No. I gave it to a backup AI before we left. It's safe on Earth. We gave up our return the moment we used the device. Mira's eyes filled with emotion. You knew you wouldn't be able to return? Dan nodded slowly. Yes, but Earth will live. That was the deal. She sat beside him quietly. You could have chosen to stay away. You didn't have to come, she said. Dan looked at her and smiled gently. You mattered. Earth mattered. That was enough. The shuttle drifted inside fold space. Its power core was low. Dan calculated their remaining energy barely enough for one more jump. But where would they go? Every system they knew was watched by the Zeruan. Then Mira pointed at a blinking dot on the screen. What's that? Dan leaned in. It was a signal, a small pulse, weak but real. He traced it. It's a listening post. An old Earth probe. I think I can power a jump close to it. If we can reach it, we might send a message. To Earth? Mira asked. No, to everyone else. Back in the Zeruan fleet, the commanders held a meeting. Veltor said, Earth is gone. Their trick will not save them. We must erase all nearby colonies. Let no trace of their kind survive. Salvek hesitated. They are not like others. They fight with feeling. They protect their own, even when it hurts them. Veltor stared coldly at him. Are you doubting the mission? Salvek answered slowly. I am wondering if we are wrong. Veltor gave a signal. Guards stepped forward. Salvek was taken away in silence and no one spoke against it. That activated the last bit of power in the shuttle. The fold spark made one more jump, pulling the ship out of the strange fold space and back into deep space. The stars returned. The small Earth probe floated in the distance. Old but still active. Dan connected their ship to it and began to send a message. This is Dan, survivor of the Zeruan mission. Earth is safe. Do not search for us, but prepare. They will come again. Be ready. Mira added her voice. Humanity is not weak. We protect our home. We remember. We choose hope. The message was sent. Hours later, the shuttle floated in silence. The fuel was gone. The lights grew dim. Mira looked at Dan. What now? Dan leaned back in his seat. We wait. For what? He smiled faintly. A sign, or maybe just peace. They sat together, watching the stars. No fear. No regret. Just silence. Back on Earth, deep inside an old base. A hidden AI received the message. It played Mira's voice to the commanders of Earth's defense. The room fell silent. Then the leader stood and said, We build, we prepare, and we remember them. The small shuttle floated in deep space, far from stars, far from war. Inside, Dan sat quietly at the controls while Myra looked out the window. It had been many hours since they sent the message through the old Earth probe. The ship's power was low. Only emergency lights still glowed. "I think we're stuck here," Myra said. Softly. Dan nodded. "We did what we came to do." She turned to face him. "But we're still alive. Maybe there's a way." Dan smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I didn't plan for escape. I only planned to save Earth." He reached into a small hidden compartment in the ship and pulled out a small black cube. It pulsed gently with a soft red glow. Myra's eyes widened. "What is that?" Dan held it carefully. "It's called a mirror core. A second part of the fold spark. It can create one last fold space. Jump, but this time, it doesn't just move us. It will erase our trail forever." Myra looked confused. "Erase our trail?" He nodded. "The Zeruan are still searching. If they follow the signal we sent, they might find this probe. But if we activate this, the probe, our message, everything nearby will vanish from space. It will protect Earth completely." "But," Myra said, her voice dropping, "if we're here when it activates, we'll vanish too," Dan finished. "No way back. No one will remember us." Silence filled the shuttle. On the Zeruan warship, Veltor stood before a new star map. A signal had been picked up. The direction was clear now. He raised a long finger and pointed at the blinking dot. "Send the drones," he ordered. "The humans have made a mistake." They tried to speak. A fleet of dark ships turned and flew toward the signal source. Faster than light, burning with purpose. Back inside the shuttle, Myra stood near the airlock, looking out into the dark. She felt small but calm. Dan joined her. "I wanted to ask," she said, "if you ever thought of just leaving Earth behind." Dan thought for a moment. "Yes, once. A long time ago, I felt forgotten. I thought maybe I didn't matter." "But you came back," she said. "I saw your message," he replied, "and I remembered something. Earth. Maybe loud, broken, and strange, but it's home." Myra smiled. "You saved it." "We saved it," Dan said. Suddenly, an alarm beeped on the panel. Dan walked over. His face grew serious. "They're coming." Myra rushed to his side. "How many?" Dan showed her the screen. "Too many. At least 10 ships." She looked at the black cube, the mirror core. "Then we have no choice," she said. Dan nodded. He set the cube in the center of the shuttle. It glowed brighter now, sensing the danger nearby. "Once I press this," he said, "everything near US will collapse into fold space. Nothing will survive. Not the probe, not the signal, not even our memories." He turned to Myra. "You don't have to stay." She shook her head. "I'm not leaving. Not without you." Dan looked at her one last time, then activated the core. A soft hum filled the ship. The air shimmered. Lights bent. Time slowed. Outside, the Zeruan ships arrived, dark, huge, ready to strike. But before they could fire, the space around them cracked. Like a mirror shattering. The stars broke apart. A bright white light swallowed everything. The Zeruan fleet vanished. The signal was erased. The probe melted into silence, and the shuttle was gone. Somewhere far away, on Earth, people began to dream. They dreamed of a man and a woman standing in light. They didn't know who they were, no names, no faces, but they felt peace. In hidden labs, Earth scientists noticed something strange. The Zeruan fleet had changed direction. They had left the area. They would not return. Earth was safe, hidden, but not forgotten. In the deepest part of fold space, a flicker of light appeared. 2 small shapes floated quietly inside a strange, glowing mist. Dan opened his eyes. Myra was beside him. "Where are we?" she whispered. "I think we're somewhere new," he replied. "Not dead, not gone. Just Beyond the stars. Dan floated in silence. Around him was nothing but glowing mist, soft, blue, and endless. He could feel the weight of space was gone. There was no sound, no danger, no pain. Slowly, Mira's voice broke the silence. "Dan, are you awake?" He turned his head. Mira was floating a few feet away, her eyes open, her breath calm. "We're alive," Dan said slowly. Like he couldn't believe it. Mira touched the wall of the escape pod around them. "But where are we?" Dan looked out the window. What they saw was not space as they knew it. It was filled with rivers of light, floating islands of stone, and shapes that seemed to move without time. They were in a different kind of place, a space beyond normal space. Fold space, Dan said. But deeper, maybe even beyond that. The pod still had air and lights, but no engines now. They couldn't move. They could only watch. "I thought we'd vanish," Mira whispered. "So did I," Dan said. "But maybe this place doesn't erase things. Maybe it keeps them safe." They both sat quietly. The silence was peaceful. Their mission was over. Earth was safe. The Zeruan were gone. But now they were somewhere far from everything lost, but together, on Earth. Weeks passed. The sky remained quiet. No ships came from the stars. No threats. No signals. People slowly began to feel different. Some said they felt protected, like something strong was watching from far away. Others dreamed of light, of a man and a woman whose faces they couldn't see, but whose presence brought peace. At a global meeting, Earth's leaders spoke of rebuilding, of preparing for the future, of unity. One commander stood and said, "Someone gave everything so we could live. We may not remember their names, but we carry their choice." And from that day forward, Earth remembered them not by name, but by story. Back in the strange Fold realm, Dan and Mira passed time by talking, laughing softly, or watching the beautiful lights move outside their pod. "I wonder if this place has time," Mira said once. Dan smiled. "Maybe it has only moments." Then one day, a light outside the pod grew brighter. It wasn't like the others. It moved with purpose. Mira pointed. "What is that?" The light came closer. It was shaped like a sphere, but it glowed gold and white. It pulsed gently as it reached them. A voice echoed not with words, but with feeling. Human minds. Strong, unique. Dan and Mira looked at each other, unsure. "You broke the pattern. You chose sacrifice over survival. Who are you?" Mira asked. The light pulsed again. "We are the keepers of the Fold. We watch. We wait. Few pass here. Fewer survive." Dan stepped forward. "Can we go home?" There was silence. Then the voice returned. "You cannot return where time has passed. But you may choose a new path." "What do you mean?" Mira asked. "We offer you a choice. Rest forever in peace. Or walk a new road far from Earth, but full of meaning." Dan turned to Mira. "What do you think?" Mira looked at the stars outside, then back at him. "We've already given Earth a future. Maybe now we help someone else." Dan smiled. "Together?" "Always," she said. The light surrounded them, soft and warm. Their pod dissolved into sparks. They were no longer lost. They had become part of something greater. Years later, in a distant star system, a small ship in trouble was about to be destroyed by a falling asteroid. Then, without warning, the asteroid stopped. A strange glow appeared in the sky. A voice spoke through the ship's radio. "You are not alone. Someone made a choice, and now we choose to help you." No one knew where the signal came from. No one ever saw the figures behind the light. But across the galaxy, stories began to spread. Of a man and a woman who walked through broken stars. Of humans who gave everything, not for power, but for hope. Of two hearts that lit the darkness. The end.